gears a little bit. I want to cover one more thing, and then we'll do our afternoon break. And then we'll come back for a really yummy closing. So, oh, I know what I wanted to share. So I had spoken to you about how, you know, community is so centric in our overall sense of health and well-being, which has been one of the huge challenges of this year for so many folks, having to kind of reconfigure or redefine community, or at least the way that they connect within community. You know, for a lot of us, it's looked like this, like, you know, square grids on the computer screen. And I know if anyone is like myself in that regard, it took me a while to get used to that idea. As a Vata, that social, you know, that being social and contact, like in like physical contact, it's important. So I looked up, of course, because those of you who know me know how much I love to do research. I love to, you know, get in there and dork out over stuff. So I did some research on cool facts on community. And so I want to share some of those with you. I don't have slides, so I'm just gonna read you some of these cool facts. If anything grabs you, feel free to write it down. Otherwise, it's just for you to receive. Some of them are quite intuitive. So we tend to, as humans, be more concerned with and care more about single individuals than we do about massive level tragedies. So what I mean by that is we have a deeper connection and compassion to people who we have personal relationships to than when we see some massive thing happen over there or outside the South. Like, we might not cry over an earthquake, but if someone close to us goes into deep illness or something, that's going to much more deeply impact us. Returning favors is part of our truest nature. I thought that was an interesting one. So the brain command programs like want you and kind of train you to do something to help someone that has helped you. Isn't that interesting? So it's like, if you want to like have people help you and support you more, you go and help and support other people more. Kind of like the rule of karma, right? They've done studies on this, which is really interesting. Another one, I was like, oh yeah, that's so true. Food made by someone else tastes better than your own cooking, even if you make the same recipe. If someone else makes it for you, it just tastes better, right? Because you feel like you've been loved and you've been taken care of. Being lonely is a lot worse for your health than you probably think. So this one's from I didn't write down all the studies because just like so many things, but this one in particular is from a Harvard University study. And they found that there is a connection between extreme loneliness and the very same levels of the blood clotting protein that is responsible for stroke and heart attacks. So in other words, like, not having friends or close connections could really have the same deadly effect on you as smoking or any of these other habits that are going to lead you to a higher likelihood of heart attack or stroke. Loneliness. A broken heart could be a legitimate cause of death. Broken heart syndrome is also called stress cardiomyopathy, and it could lead to critical short-term heart muscle malfunction. A broken heart. It has been proven psychologically that it only takes 4 minutes to fall in love. So watch out. In a lifetime, you make on average 396 friends. Woohoo! Our social media tells us we have way more than that, but we know it's not true. So on average, 396 friends, but only 1 out of every 12 friendships is actually enduring or sustainable. Oh, this was a follow-up on the loneliness one. Being alone for a very long time is as bad. They believe it is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. What? That one really blew my mind. When faced with major illnesses, individuals who have a good social network are in a much better position to survive. This is from a 10-year study from the Center of Aging at Flinders University. A strong network of friends is more important than close family relatives for prolonging life. People aged over 70, but who have an extensive network of loved ones tend to live 22% longer than those who don't have that network of connections. So if you want longevity for grandma and grandpa, go set them up for social endeavors. Get them out there to the bridge club, get them in the seniors yoga, set them up on friend dates or romantic dates, whatever. You're never too old for that. Your brain reacts the same way, whether it's you that's in danger or a friend that's in danger. That was a really interesting one as well. It's scientifically proven that being in the company of good friends and happy, positive influences keep us happier. Pretty intuitive. And it also reduces stress. So those good social networks help us to reduce stress. This is kind of a creepy one. In the closest networks of friends, it has been asserted that you probably share about 1% of your DNA. Like, what is that? I know Ria's into epigenetics, but I mean, what? Isn't that weird? Friendship is the emotion that babies recognize even before they start walking or talking. So as they're observing the world around them, friendship is like the first thing they start to like acknowledge and recognize in the relationships around them. This one is really sad. It says 1/3 of Americans, I believe they're talking about probably specifically the United States. That's my assumption, which when you hear the rest of it, you might see why I'm making that assumption. 1/3 of Americans have never interacted with their next door neighbor. That's so sad. Go bring them some cookies. Keeping friendship alive in a marriage is 5 times as important, 5 times, as physical intimacy. Marrying your best friend eliminates the risk of separation by 70%. 70%. So it's more likely to last a lifetime if it's your best friend. So go ahead and ask that gal or that guy. If you don't have friends at work, there's only like an 8% chance that you like your job. That's so low. If you don't have friends at work, only 8% chance that you enjoy your job. To truly reap all the health benefits and rewards of friendship and community, you need to have 3 to 5 close friends. So a little goes a long way. You don't need like 3,000, despite what Facebook tells you. 3 to 5. But you do also need more than 1, particularly if you're in partnership. Science said it, you need other friends, not just your partner. Even if older folks have existing networks of friends, they are twice as likely to develop dementia if they feel lonely. The feeling of loneliness makes them twice as susceptible to develop dementia. This is a good one. Lifestyle. Keep this in mind as you go out with all your new yoga and Ayurveda information. Lifestyle of one member in a group of friends can really deeply affect the lifestyle of other friends. So if one member starts working out and eating healthy, then his or her friends are a lot more likely to adopt those habits too. Aha. Any friendship that is born between the period of 16 to 28 years is much more likely to be a robust and long-lasting friendship. So when you think about the folks that you're close to now, or maybe some of you are still in that stage as well, those are like that's the pitta stage. So you're like really building fire and passion, and that impacts your relationships and how deeply you're able to connect with people as well. And when you hold the hand of a loved one, you feel less pain. Your pain receptors work in a different way. So you will feel less pain and you will worry less. And that is like a very intuitive thing that, you often see if someone is sick or distressed. It's like one of the first things that as humans we naturally do is we go for the hand, or the person, if there's pain, they'll squeeze your hand. And so I just thought that was so sweet. And I wanted to give you all these fun facts about community, because one of the last things that I want to cover with you, as far as like theory or philosophy, is what the definition of yoga actually is. Because this is something I'm really passionate about, and I just feel like it's always relevant. It's always been relevant, but in 2020, I think it's really important that folks get clear on what yoga actually means in its more historical sense. So I'm going to get some slides up here, keeping in mind all of these amazing benefits of living in healthy, loving, and unified community, like quite literally uplifting your health and the health of those around you by forging these deep and meaningful connections. So I'm going to go to a screen share. Oh yeah, before I go to that, Chloe's sharing, today I learned from Brene Brown, I love her, that a 20-second hug, yeah, this is a good one too, increases oxytocin and lowers your blood pressure. Yeah, so a quick little like pat doesn't do it. It has to be a 20-second hug. So when we're actually able to hug and kiss and touch again with your friends, like you really got to go for it. Hold them there 20 whole seconds if you want the shot of oxytocin and that lowering of your blood pressure. Good. All right, so I'm going to get in the screen share here. Everyone can see it? Yeah? Okay. All right, what is yoga? Yeah, yoga, yes. In the West, when folks say yoga, they're often referring to what is actually called asana, which I know many of you are already familiar with this, but asana it's the set of physical postures, which is one of the 8 limbs of yoga. So we're going to look at the definition of yoga from the more historically intended definition. So as many of you probably know, yoga has descended from Hindu spiritual and aesthetic discipline. I think that that's really important to put out there. This practice is not a Western practice. It was not developed in the Western world. It's very old, it's very ancient, and it belongs to and comes out of South Asia. And the word itself, yoga, a yog or yuj is a yoke. So the Sanskrit word for a yoke is yuj. So some of you may have heard this before, yoking, which is why it's often said to be union, right? It's a yoking together, which I'm gonna talk a little bit more about. So the yuj, let me actually go back. The yuj was used specifically when it is spoken about, when yoga is spoken about in the ancient Indian epics, the yuj, they're actually talking about a yoke, and it was used for war horses. And they were a device, the yuj was a device and a technique to calm the horses down. Because when they had on the yuj, they knew that they had like work to do, and they had to work together, because if you have two war horses trying to run off in all different directions, when they have the yuj on, it's not going to work. So the yuj was worked to calm the horses down, and the horses are used throughout the Indian epics as a metaphor for the mind. And so the yuj, the yoga, was really in its natural form used as a way to calm and to tame the mind. It was not really intended to be a way to get like a flexible, fit, thin yoga frame. That was not what they were talking about when they said yuj or yoga in the ancient texts. So yeah, they have been used as the metaphor for the frenetic mind and for life experience. If they are left uncontrolled, if the mind is left uncontrolled, it's utterly useless. Just like a horse. If a horse is just, off its rocker, there's not much you can do with it, right? So Patanjali presented yoga kind of as a more like as a noun as we went into the 8 limbs. So it had like a little bit more of a like it's like a little bit more of a stale. And remember, Patanjali, when I'm speaking about Patanjali, I mean the Yoga Sutras. So actually, as far as yoga texts go, that's a relatively modern text in the huge history of yoga. Before his time, though, yoga was known as a verb or an action. And the meaning of the verb yoga meant to engage, to be involved, to participate, to connect. So this is what you might hear some people today call yoga in action. Like I know one foundation, some may be familiar with, Off the Mat into the World. They use that term a lot, yoga in action. So yoga was intended to be a verb. I'm gonna repeat those again, because this is like how passionate I am about this. Yoga means to take action, to be engaged, to be involved, to participate, to connect. Let me just turn to page 2 of how I want to define yoga. I have a lot of notes here. This is very important to me. So the original definition is that yoga was an active process. I feel like this is something as well that can get blurred a lot. It's like yoga is something like, once I get that pose, that's like the end. And I think some here are definitely having this experience where it's like, it's such an active process, and there truly is no finish line. A finish line doesn't exist. It's not that you ever get to a point where you're like, oh, okay, now I know yoga. And I think with all sorts of wisdom paths, it's probably very similar. It's like the more you study and you learn, and the more you open up that can of worms, the more blaringly obvious it becomes how little that you know. And it seems like a paradox, but it's like the more you study, the more you know how little you know, because it is so massive. It's a manner of engaging with the world. Yoga is a manner of engaging with the world, and it is about participating in relationships, striving toward harmony and wholeness. I say this because, we live in a time where there are 2 traditional paths in yoga. Some of you have heard this before. One is of the aesthetic, and the other is of the householder. It would be very rare in the modern world to find anyone who's truly living the path, the yogic path of the aesthetic. And what that means is like, I've relinquished all of my earthly belongings. I am going to go and live in a cave. I will spend all day, every day meditating. This is not, that is not the path. That is not the spiritual path that has been presented to people in a modern world. We are all household practitioners, which means we raise the kids and we wash the dishes and we do the yoga, right? So we actually have the opposite duty. We are not cutting ourselves off from everything else to only focus on our relationship to Brahma, or the God of your understanding. We actually have a duty. If we are to say that we are practicing yoga, we actually have a duty and an obligation to engage with the world and engage in our relationships and engage within our communities. If we are to actually get toward a place of union and harmony and wholeness. The Mahabharata, which is, it's this wildly long Indian epic poem. There's like 10,000 verses. I think it might be like the longest book, or like one of the longest books that exists, or spiritual text for sure. It has 884 references to yoga within it. And every single one of them, all 884 references to yoga within the Mahabharata, include the definition of yoga as an activity, as a verb, as a practice, as something that you do, action-based, versus the more modern translation, which is extremely oversimplified as being union. Yoga means union. That was kind of like Patanjali's representation of it. And that's why I say that's like a noun. That's a noun-like offering of yoga. Yoga in its traditional sense was considered a verb, an action of engagement. So I feel like this is interesting food for thought at this time in the history of the planet, for those of us that would like to consider ourselves practitioners of yoga, to really consider how you are, because as we've been studying, this is also a vital part of our sense of health and balance and well-being. We need community. We need that for our health. And if you are working with yoga and you want to say you're a practitioner of yoga, it's also part of our, for those of us that feel that we are yoga practitioners, it's also part of our dharma. It's part of our duty to take action. So it's a training of attention and a training of engagement. And I'm going to give you this. I really love this equation from Kate Saal, is her name, Saal. How to do yoga. So step 1, act, engage, and create yoga by getting involved. Number 2, pay attention. The third is to be aware that after the first 2 steps, then you'll have choices. You'll take an action, then you'll pay attention to what the result is of the action. And then depending on what you observe, you'll be granted choices. Then step 4, make a choice. The 5th step is learn from that choice, and then go right back to step 1 and start all over again. So I wanted to share this. I know it seems like so, like maybe oversimplified, but I feel like there can be, particularly when people feel like things are a little bit chaotic, We can be like scared into, or like as a nervous system response, we can like go into a state of being frozen. And when we look at the definition of yoga, like actually, if we're not taking any action at all, as far as like being active and engaged members of our community, we're actually doing a disservice to this practice, and we're not completing our dharma. And we see this in the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know if anyone has read that text, but if you have, you remember that in part of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, there's like, Arjuna, there's a whole long, most of the Bhagavad Gita is it's a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. And during most of the story, Arjuna is on the floor of the chariot in the state of freeze. And he's like, I don't want to do it, Krishna, I don't want to do it. And Krishna's like, not doing it's not a choice. You have to engage. It is your dharma. In his case, it's about going into a battle, a literal battle. That's a big metaphor as well used. And, if we look at the world today, there's quite a few battles going on. So according to the ancient historical context of the definition of yoga, it is not our job to lay down on the chariot floor and cry to Krishna that we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. It is our job to go out and to do the yoga. And what I really like is that in step 5, it says, learn from that choice, then return to step 1 and start it all over again. Because I think also what happens with some folks that get frozen, it can either be from fear, because of a, fight, flight, or freeze response. And it can also be like, I just don't want to do the wrong thing. I want to take action, but I want to take the right action. But remember, step 3 is like, you got to make a choice. So you make the best choice that you can with the information you have, and then you learn from that, and then you start again. So essentially, like any action is better than inaction when we're talking about practicing yoga, because we can all always constantly be learning from our choices. And what's so beautiful about the path of yoga is nowhere in any of the ancient texts does it ever say you have to get it all right. It doesn't say that anywhere. It doesn't say you have to always be right. It doesn't say you have to, absolutely never offend anybody. It says you have to take action. That's what it says. And then it says, learn from that action and do better, and jump back up off the chariot floor and get back out on the battlefield, get back out in your community. So, all right, I'm going to close my share and get down off my soapbox now. That's the definition of yoga. Was that like brand new news for anyone? Was any of that shocking? Like, oh, I just thought yoga was a posture or two here and there. What's nice about this group, because I personally know lots of you, I know you're all like doing the yoga. I see you. I follow you. So yeah, this is important to go over when we're thinking about health and connections and community. If we want to have this resilient mind, a compassionate heart, a balanced body, if we're looking at health as something that is holistic, we cannot leave out the importance and how vital it is to go out there and be in your community. So here, I never knew of the OG meaning behind Patanjali's union. Yeah, I did think of it more as union. Yeah, because you know what? That's what folks are told, because it's like, it's too complicated. And particularly, to be fair, we talk about this a lot in training, like in the small container of a public yoga class, it's really, I mean, imagine if you went to go take a vinyasa class and then a teacher was like, all right, everybody, this is what yoga actually means. And they went into this whole spiel about like taking action in your community. You'd probably be like, can we just like start moving now? So to be fair, it's like, you know, yay, we're in a retreat. So I have time and space that we can talk about this because community is an important part of health. But yeah, generally, as far as it goes, even in trainings, it's offered as like, and Patanjali says yoga is union. If you're lucky, Chloe says, I would love that class. I know you would, Chloe. I know you would, you would take it in if I was getting up on my soapbox in yoga class. Thank you. Yeah. So even in trainings, it might be like, and yoga's union, and it comes from the Sanskrit word that means yoke or yoking from yuj. Like you might get that much, but I think like when you really start to dig deeper, like, well, what was the yuj, you know, really used for? And what is the metaphor behind the yuj? And what is the Bhagavad Gita, you know, which is part of the Mahabharata? It's part of the same great text. Like what are they saying about yoga? How are they using that term when it is said 884 times? Because they certainly weren't talking about headstands or like cute little tidy packaged up union is not what they were talking about. They were talking about going out on the battlefield and getting sloppy and like living the life and meeting your next door neighbor. I mean, that statistic, when I saw that, that made me so like go and knock on your neighbor's door and be like, hey, this is who I am, you know? Better yet, like speak up for your neighbor's rights if you have that opportunity, you know? That's yoga. That's yoga. Whew. All right. Yeah. Okay. So Tiffany's saying, couldn't the translation be wrong? If we use the verb from union to unite, it still implies uniting. Yeah. So Patanjali, it's not that union. Yes. Thank you for that question. It's not that saying union is wrong. It's that it was changed from being like a verb into being a noun. That was the major shift from the ancient texts to the way that Patanjali translated it, or offered it, I should say, because Patanjali didn't translate it. It was, you know, whoever way back when in the day that translated it from Devanagari to, you know, the Arabic alphabet. And then we have what we have today as the sutras. So it turned into something that was more noun like, but certainly to unite or to unify as a verb, as an action, of course, yes. This was like what it was actually being presented as. Yeah. To yoke. Yes. Good. All right. And I wanted to, I saw Tiffany, I did not see your additional comment until after we were on break. So I did just want to address that because I think that it's really important. Which what her comment was, I meant that it implies action. So yes, that is not incorrect. And in addition, the assumption of action is like part of what's kind of happening right now in the spiritual field, as far as like it's, I don't want to say downfall, but where we as a collective in wellness and in spiritual health and lineage are kind of getting it wrong. So the implied union or implied action, that gets us to the we are all one place. But I don't mean we are all one where it's like truly what's happening. I mean, your yoga teacher who's like, yay, happy, happy, joy, joy. We are all one. Yoga means union. But they're not actually taking any action to assure that that's the reality for folks in their circle. Does that make sense? So it's like, yes, in this passive form as a noun, union does imply that there's action to unite, but it's only implied. It doesn't come right out and say. And in order for us to get to that point where there's true union and there's true connection and true community, requires action. It doesn't require meditation and butterflies and rainbows and we are all one and kumbaya. It requires action. Does that make sense? Does that more distinguish between those? Yeah. 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 This is part of the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. And really the conflict, for those that haven't seen, I'm going to read it for anyone who's watching this later on replay. It says, in the Bhagavad Gita, while explaining the role of yoga, Sri Krishna says to Arjuna, yoga karmasu kanushalam, meaning doing your duties skillfully, is the other meaning of yoga. Doing your duties. That's the thing. It's an action, doing the duties skillfully is the other meaning of yoga, because with the practice of yoga, one can achieve the skills required to perform one's duties correctly and sincerely. So when they're talking about duty, they're talking about dharma. This whole conversation in the Bhagavad Gita, it's all about dharma, karma, and seva. With complete detachment of the results, that's seva. Complete detachment of the results, selfless service, that's seva, that's action. Like I'm truly taking this action that doesn't benefit me in any way, or maybe it does, but that's not why I'm doing it. And I really don't care about that. I'm doing it because it is my dharma to take action, thereby creating the mind of a yogi, freedom from the attachment of results. Yeah, that's seva. And in the philosophy of yoga, in order to get out of the cycle of samsara, which is birth, life, death, rebirth, the only way you can really get there and free yourself from karma, which are like afflictions, that which is attached to you, checks and balances that you need to work out. The only way to do that is through seva. So this is actually exactly what I'm talking about. Seva meaning selfless action. Action for the sake of doing what is dutifully required of you to be a citizen of this earth. Yeah. Heck yeah. Thank you for sharing that quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. Beautiful. All right.